Alright, so I guess this will be my next part of my series with diagnosing an outboard motor. So on this one, you need fuel. Alright, yeah, and it's cold out here. So they have this style of a fuel filter. Okay, and there's a bolt. Usually they come kind of packaged. I even tried to JB weld this, and it broke. It is what it is. So you could get a new one of those, okay? And I don't know what they are. They're probably not a lot of money. But you open up the cap and you got this, right? And then you got a filter, and then you have this. Okay, so on this motor, we had an issue. It just wasn't running right. Seemed fuel related. So this seems to be a good one to talk about. So the number one thing, you know, when you're dealing with fuel, obviously, is it's everything in the path. So our fuel tank, our fuel line, our bulb, our connectors, our fuel lines to the fuel filter, and our fuel lines that go to the pump, and our fuel line that goes from the pump to the carburetors. So all that has to be good. It's got to be sealed good, and you know, you got to have good flow. So in this one, you know, they've got this old style where the fuel filter goes. That's one of these old style ones. These things break. If you honker down on them, they'll just break. So I tried to repair this one, no good. So I got a good molar filter, and these you can get like there's a lot of places that have them. Even at Harbor Freight, you can go to Academy, Walmart, and then these are replaceable cartridge. So you just unspin it, and the cartridge comes out. You put a new cartridge in it, and you're off and running. And then what I'll do is when I get this coming in, I'll tie wrap this somewhere, and then I've got the old fuel pump out. So with this guy, with this bulb, I can see the fuel coming in, fuel going out. So I started the engine. I don't have video of this, but I had this bulb filled. It was hard, and then as the engine was running, the fuel was going down, right? But it wasn't pulling fuel into it. So we got another fuel pump, and I'm going to put a fuel pump on this one. Meantime, go ahead, I can connect the fuel, pump up the bulb, see how much fuel we have coming out. And you can do that with like a water bottle of some sort. I don't know, here's a water bottle, you know, or anything really. Here's a good bottle. So all I'm going to do is, this is my out, okay, and then I'm going to connect my fuel line, and then I'm just going to pump up the bulb. I got good fuel coming through there, okay. So I disconnect it again because I'm going to put the fuel pump on. That's one good way to check it. The second thing you do, you can pump up your bulb, okay, and with your fuel line, right, you put a little pressure behind it. When you push this down, you should have some pressure. Pump up with pressure, and when you disconnect this fuel line, you can just take your finger and push on this, and it should release fuel, and it'll be under pressure as well. Alright, so once you get your fuel pump on, you check your pressures. Seems like you're getting good pressure to there. Watch your bulb. Then if you're still having a problem, then you know you can start looking at your carburetors. Something to know about these gray hoses. You know, if you got an old gray hose, you know, they would deteriorate over time, right? They just would. But the new ones don't have that same kind of lining. And it's mostly from these guys going ahead and putting ethanol fuel in them. And they would deteriorate the inside of the line. Basically, the bulb has 2 check valves in it. Okay? And there's an arrow, right? So horizontally, this is going to push up. It's pushing the fuel up. So this check valve kind of opens and closes. But when it needs to pull fuel, there's enough suction that pulls the check valve up, allow the fuel to keep pulling through the line. If it was down, the other check valve would now be closed and you would not be able to pull fuel through this way. If it's open, it's only slightly open. So the proper way is to have it up in the air. Now slightly open might work depending on how you have it rigged. I opted, instead of ordering that part, I went ahead and just got a Moeller fuel filter. And these actually, to change the filter, they just untwist and then you can change that filter. But you do have to take it off. So, but it fixes this issue and gets them going. And now we're pressurized. We see we got fuel up to here. There is a little bit of an air bubble, but the filtered gas now is coming out through here. So yeah, it kind of goes in the outside of the glass, and then this is fuel that comes out to my fuel pump. So yeah, I just ran it on a trash can. I'm gonna run it now on a hose. Hey, carburetors. So my next little video is a little science experiment, and it's a little rudimentary Venturi that I built. And the reason I did that was just, I don't know, I was messing around. But on carburetors, so basically a carburetor, not all, but most, are a Venturi system. And what I mean by that is it acts like a Venturi, and that you have a fuel bowl and it fills up with fuel, and you have that little needle and seat that once the float comes up, it shuts the bowl off from receiving any more fuel. Okay, so if you think about it, that's a bowl that's sitting there with this fuel in it. So the carburetor has to draw the fuel up in order to pull it into the engine. If you think about the engine's basically, it's just a big receiving device. The carburetor acts like a Venturi, and it pulls that fuel, it pulls a vacuum. The engine's constantly pulls a vacuum, and either that vacuum is, when at idle, it's going to be, you know, not as great a vacuum as, say, at wide open throttle. Okay, but what happens is it pulls the fuel up out of the bowl, and it uses a Venturi system to do that. And the next video, I'm just basically showing the principle behind it, so that you can see how Venturi kind of works. And of course, there's more to the carburetor than just a Venturi. You know, it's mixing the air and the fuel, and it's got to be the right mixture, which is really the jets that are in it. I mean, there's other things to it, but I thought this was a good thing to show, so that you could see kind of like how it works. And that's why it's important to keep it clean, keep all the passageways clean, so that the Venturi can operate correctly, pull the fuel up out of the bowl, and And then it's mixed with the air as it goes in and past usually the reed valves and into the cylinders. Of course, a two-stroke is ported a certain way so that that happens. And you know, on a four-stroke, it'd be pulled up through the intake valves. So anyway, I hope this gives you a decent idea of how that works. And that'd be the next start of the fuel. You know, you got to make sure your carburetors are, you know, are performing correctly. The one thing about it is, like, you know, that air idle jet screw usually kind of looks like a little sharp pin with usually a spring on it. That's just allowing more or less of that venturi to pull that fuel up. So, you know, if you think about it, you open it up, there's more fuel that goes into the carburetor or less fuel. Really, it's an air idle jet, is what usually they call it. And it's just allowing more air to come in or less air to pull that fuel up through the carburetor. And then you're just kind of creating a venturi. So this hooked up to my compressor. Let's feel around the edges where there's like air coming through. So now that I got that created, I'm going to just test this. It's like a little bowl of water. See for yourself that works pretty good. And it'll fill, vacuum all of that stuff out of that bowl that I got over here of water.
I